Right now is a crazy time, you guys, because its closings are happening literally as I speak. In this building behind me is where we're hearing from the government, and I have some updates for you that I will read, and then we'll get to our all-star panel. So here are a couple of updates from the court, and this is Christy Slavic, by the way, who is one of the prosecutors who's presenting the closings. So she's saying, consider two moments. March 2016. At the Intercontinental Hotel, the defendant got violent with Cassie. You saw what happened. He dragged her back to the freak-off. 2024 at Jane's house, the defendant choked and hit her. She ran away, couldn't get away. These are chapters in the same book. The defendant counted on silence and shame. He thought that his fame and wealth and power put him above the law. Over the last 7 weeks, you've heard how he used his staff to promote his power. No one could stop him. We'll talk about RICO, including sex trafficking and transportation for prostitution, which are also separately charged as standalone crimes. You may have heard of racketeers. When someone commits a crime as part of a group, they are more dangerous. A group of people whose purpose was to serve and protect the defendant. It's his kingdom. Everyone was there to serve him, fulfilling all of his desires, including his sexual desires. We need to show at least 2 racketeering crimes. So that's where we're at as of now. The updates coming into the courtroom. We have our amazing panel of producers, Jordan, Alex, Nick, who are all helping out, and Bailey and Nicole. Hi, guys. You're doing the best you can, and it's great. And I want to bring on our all-star guest that we have. We have Serena Townsend, former sex crimes prosecutor and criminal defense attorney, and Mauricio Padilla, criminal defense attorney. Hi, guys. Thanks for bearing with us today and sticking with us. And Mauricio, I want to ask you about what we were just talking about with racketeering. The fact that there are no co-defendants with Diddy, it's kind of hard for even me to understand. Can you explain that?
Honestly, I've never seen anybody stand trial for RICO by themselves. And if I was, and I know that we've talked about this before, like Dave Chappelle made a joke about it. You know, he's like, you know, this guy's standing trial for RICO by himself. And it's something that the defense is definitely going to hammer home. This is not a normal RICO case by any stretch of the imagination. The fact that he's there by himself, the fact that they're talking conspiracy, but there are no co-conspirators sitting at the table with him, the fact that we're talking about baby oil and orgies and not kilos of cocaine, that's something that you have to emphasize for the jury. The defense is gonna say, this is about the federal government being upset at P. Diddy and trying to make him into a villain, a RICO case where it's actually just a domestic violence case and a guy that had very unsavory and perverted fetishes. That's pretty much going to be, you know, their defense in a nutshell, as I anticipate.
And my question mark for you, Serena, about all of that is we've talked a lot on this live stream and past episodes of my show Scandal, which, by the way, you guys can subscribe if you like what you're seeing. We've talked about this, the fact that, okay, maybe Diddy's sex life is different than what you or I or whoever does. We've got the 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lube, and he's a little different. But is that a crime? And I think that's one of the questions I'm wondering if you think the defense is going to bring up. Maybe he's odd to you, but it doesn't mean it's illegal. What do you think?
Absolutely. I do think so. I think that they're going to say, listen, they're trying to paint him as just a bad guy. They are going to throw all of these unsavory, kinky, weird things at you to just turn you off because they think that you can't handle that. They think that you think that that's a crime, and it is not. They have to prove I would say to the jury, the law is very, very technical, because it is. And if they cannot prove that he actually committed specific crimes that fall into the elements of what they've charged, he is not guilty. And yeah, these freak-offs are weird and they're strange, and it might not be something that you would want to participate in. But look at the text messages from the participants who took the stand. They were eager to participate. They went and bought outfits. They went and procured other people to participate. Now, in that sense, it is a little bit strategically nerve-wracking, because you might then be admitting to other things like sex trafficking. And I do think the defense has to worry about those other counts. But the RICO count, I do think, is very much in play here. And the defense can double down on the fact that they're just trying to paint him as a weirdo, and he's not a criminal.
All roads are leading back to RICO, including one of our viewer questions that I have to bring up, which, by the way, if you guys have questions, write them in the chat and we will pick them out and talk about them. This is going to be a question for you, Mauricio, and it's from one of our viewers, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name. Abilisha Derwal, I believe I pronounced that correctly, and I'm sorry if I didn't, but they ask, what do people think will be the 2 RICO crimes that will prove his guilt? So what do you think, Mauricio? I mean, we heard, a lot of testimony on the government side of things. That could be a different question. But what are you thinking are the 2 incidents that would really hit that home?
I mean, I think that they have them on the procuring sex workers and having them transported from state to state. There's been a lot of testimony about, different people, doing it for him, or that they brought, 3 guys in one night to have sex with his girlfriend, and all these guys are flying around. And I think the government did a good job at bringing in the airline tickets, showing who paid for the airline tickets, and that's I think something that P. Diddy had been doing for so long that he never even occurred to him that this was illegal. So I think that there's plenty of evidence that he was doing that. And then also they're going to have him with transporting drugs from state to state for the purposes of these freak-offs, which is another predicate crime. And I think that they had his former assistant testifying and other people testifying, including Jane, that would take place. So from the evidence that I've heard, I think they got him on at least those 2.
It's so wild that now we're at the finish line, because we've had 6 weeks of the government going through and having all of this evidence presented. I mean, we've talked about the freak-off videos. By now, you guys have seen the actual photos of the lube and the Johnson & Johnson baby oil, the brand loyalty that was featured in all of this in the exhibits. And now we're at the closings. We're at the finish line, so we're hearing them kind of tie a bow on everything. And I do have an update for that for you as well. Here's right now the closing argument. Slavic says, this is to the jurors, the defendant was the head of the Combs enterprise. There was an inner circle, his chief of staff and his bodyguards. The names changed, but the roles remained the same. You've heard about KK, Combs' right brain. She lived in 2-Star, and when they say 2-Star, they're talking about Miami, Star Island. She communicated with the defendant's girlfriends, his security. You heard names: D-Rock, Bonds, Rube, Uncle Polly, Fahim. They were armed and ready. Remember the incident at the diner with Suge Knight? David James told you Combs had guns. In the search, law enforcement found guns, including a rifle with the serial number defaced in LA, 2 AR-15s with their serial numbers cut out in the defendant's closet. You also have rotating cast of assistants paid by the defendant's business. Brendan Paul, for example, one of the recent people who testified, said he made $100,000 a year. KK made 6 times that. When your boss asks you to buy drugs, you're committing a crime. When you kidnap someone or locked his girlfriend in a hotel room after your boss stomped on his face, it's a crime. And there's another really important thing. One of my producers sent me a powerful line from closing. The defendant was at the top of this enterprise. Remember, it's his kingdom. Everyone was there to serve him. And I know that this is something that we've talked about a lot, the fact that it's only Diddy and he doesn't have any co-conspirators who are charged in relation to this. As of now, we kind of inferred potentially KK maybe down the line, who's to say, but it's all about Diddy. And I want to talk about our poll too. This is the question that was written. How closely have you been following the case? Some people say 65% very closely, not very closely, 22%, not at all, 11%. And to those not at all, welcome. We're here to talk about it and break everything down. I want to go back to Serena Townsend and ask about all of this. I know that Serena has been following this case, honestly, probably before the indictment even came down. We saw those civil lawsuits. And that's actually what I want to talk to you about, Serena, is the civil lawsuits. The one, in my opinion, and I assume yours, that started it all. That was Cassie Ventura, who filed the first of many back in November of 2023 under the New York Survivors Act, the Adult Survivors Act, rather. So can you talk to me about the civil suits? Where does everything stand now?
Yeah. Well, the civil suit is, going to benefit greatly from a guilty verdict in this case. I think it's a wonderful strategy. Even if she didn't mean for it to be a strategy, it will be a wonderful strategy for her to use if there's a guilty verdict having to do with anything that P. Diddy did to her. Because the standard of proof in a criminal case is beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a very, very high, it's the highest level of proof you'd have to show. It's basically like the government has to prove 99% that this happened in this way by this person. And a civil suit only has to be proven by a preponderance of the evidence, which basically is 51%. It's a more likely than not standard. And so routinely, when people want to pursue Civil suits, you know, the criminal case happens and then the civil case can get, you know, found in a person's favor if there's a guilty plea. Now, in this case, Cassie has already been found, you know, has already succeeded in her civil case. It's very strange and different when it goes in that direction. Usually the strategy is get the guilty verdict and then get a civil payout. So for her, I think it makes her look very good and very credible because she's already gotten that result. It's not like the decision in this criminal case will help her. So she doesn't have, the prosecution can't use her as an interested witness in that way in their closing argument. They can't say to a jury, look, the only reason Cassie is saying all of these things is because a guilty verdict will help her civil case. So she's very clean on that front as a witness. So it's just a very interesting dynamic to see how this thing played out differently than a lot of other cases.
I agree. And I mean, we heard lengthy witness testimony from Cassie at the start. She was the star witness. Before this trial even began, she was going to be the star witness. And it turned out it was true. However, Cassie with her civil lawsuits, and then there were many that followed suit. Surprisingly, even some people, I guess not surprisingly, I don't know, you make the determination. Other people listed Cassie in their lawsuits and said, because of Cassie's bravery, I felt comfortable coming forward. And we've done other episodes on this on Scandal, my channel, where we talked about, okay, how many suits are against P. Diddy? And there's upwards of, I think, 50 civil suits that were filed at one time, which leads me to my next question, Mauricio. If there are that many people who are making these allegations against P. Diddy, Cassie being one of them, then of course Jane and Mia, why don't we hear more witness testimony from the government, some of these people who had already filed civil suits against him?
Because the government doesn't want to water down, you know, their witness list with people that, number one, have a financial reason to get involved, and those are people that their credibility could be challenged immediately with, you know, with questioning, like, you know, you're actually suing, you know, P. Diddy, and you know, there's actually a financial motivation for you to be here. You know, the government probably felt that they didn't need to go that route, and they probably felt that they were better off with the witnesses that they brought forward. I mean, the fact that he has, I heard it was more like 70 civil lawsuits. The fact that he's got that amount of voluminous civil lawsuits is something that affects him greatly, because people are looking at it and they're going to say, okay, well, you know what? What if half of them are fictitious, but half of them are real? It's something that hurts his credibility. And, you know, listen, jurors, just like everybody else, they're not supposed to be looking at the news. They're not supposed to be doing their outside research, but it's just a fact that they do. So anything that's out there in social media, anything that's out there in the news that hurts your client, a jury could look at it, and it's not beneficial for him at all.
You're right, jurors. Those are the ones who we really should be talking about today, right? Because they're the ones who are going to decide what happens. I'm so eager to see. And I have another update for you guys from court. This is happening right now. As we talked about, those of you who are just tuning in right now, the government is presenting its closing arguments right now. So these are some updates. The law does not require us to know that they liked committing these crimes. You saw KK chiding the defendant to not be so reckless. But she got him cash, drugs. She was a member of the enterprise. It impacted interstate commerce. Minimal is fine. Combs knowingly became a member. He was the boss. He was the through line. The racketeering acts, distribution of drugs, kidnapping, arson, bribery, facilitating sex trafficking of Cassie and Jane, forced labor, travel for commercial sex, cover up. You only need to find that someone would commit 2 acts in any of these categories. It could be 2 acts of drug distribution, 1 kidnapping, just 2. You have far more than 2. Let's start with the drugs, an essential ingredient of freak-offs. The most involved were D-Rock, KK, and Fahim, but others helped keep the drug supply high. We are not talking about marijuana, but what Brendan Paul called hard drugs. There are stipulations of the drugs found in the searches: cocaine, meth, oxy, ketamine, a dissociative drug, GHB, mushrooms, Molly, 2C, a combination dyed pink, It's 1305 and 1306. The quantities are not relevant. It's an element of this crime. Distribution does not require a sale. So that's what's going on right now in the courtroom behind me, which, by the way, for those of you guys just tuning in, we're live in Lower Manhattan outside of the courthouse. So that's why my hair is acting like a wild person based on the weather that we've got here in New York. We do have some questions from you guys who have been following along. This one's from Smarty Pants. Question: could the prosecutors have charged Diddy with a separate kidnapping, forced labor charges, and gun charges in addition to RICO? To which I asked Serena Townsend, former sex crimes prosecutor, what do you think?
Strategically, they probably decided not to, because it makes more sense for them to seek out this bigger RICO charge, which has more serious consequences and higher amounts of prison time. They could have, but think about what forum we're in right now. What you're identifying, and you're not wrong, Smarty Pants, you are very smart. You're kind of identifying what it would look like in a state prosecution. That's usually what you would see on like a lower level, although those counts also carry a high amount of prison time at the state level. But usually when the feds get involved, they usually try to seek out those counts where only the feds could charge. And so in their minds, they're looking at RICO, they want the big sexy crime rather than like the state typical crimes that you're thinking about.
I like what you said, the big sexy crime of RICO. And maybe it's perhaps because RICO is so mysterious. There are so many things that go into it. I mean, there are the predicate counts or the allegations. There's so much happening there. And I guess this kind of leads into my next question, Mauricio. I've talked to you a lot today about this alleged domestic violence situation. And I guess I say alleged, but P. Diddy's team, right in opening, said, yes, this was domestic violence. So I guess hand up, they did say that. The video I'm, of course, talking about is the Intercontinental video with P. Diddy and Cassie in LA. We've all seen it. It was originally leaked to CNN. And a lot of people I have asked me the question, okay, why wasn't Diddy charged with domestic violence? A lot of people are wondering about that. What do you think, Mauricio? Why wasn't that a charge in all of this?
Well, because they're charging him with RICO, like she said, it's like the big sexy crime, and they don't want to at the end of the day, what he did in that crime could have been a misdemeanor if she didn't go to the hospital. It's just a domestic violence charge. I don't think that the federal prosecutors are going to charge a crime like that. They're going to use it to satisfy the force, fraud, or coercion of sex trafficking. Because at the end of the day, that the amount of time he's looking at on the sex trafficking is gonna shadow whatever time he would be looking at regarding a misdemeanor domestic violence case. So I don't see them charging that, but they are going to use it over and over again. Now the defense is going to do something that we talk about a lot in death penalty litigation, which is called run to the bummer. That means like whatever's negative, bring it up first. So I anticipate you're going to see his defense counsel stand up and immediately fall on the sword and talk about the video and talk about the domestic violence and tell him, yeah, my client may not, be the greatest person, and my client may have had a problem, and my client may have committed an act of domestic violence, but my client did not commit RICO. My client is at the head of a criminal organization. And I think that's where he's going to start highlighting the differences between this case and what jurors are used to seeing or hearing about when they think about a RICO case. Mafia, organized crime, that's the type of thing that they're looking at. So I think that the defense is going to go back and show the distinctions between what the jury probably expects to see from a RICO case and what this case is about.